What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. This weekend is the 2024 installment of the Money in the Bank Premium Live event. And of course, I'm super excited about it, especially because it's near my neck of the woods in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And so for today's episode, we're going to go through the entire timeline of the Money in the Bank ladder match from the first one in 2005 at WrestleMania 21 all the way until the most recent one as of the recording, which was 2023 in London, England. And we're going to be determining what if every Money in the Bank winner was different. And if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share this to all your friends, subscribe, and press the notification bell for when future episodes get released, and leave a comment down below about today's topic or suggesting a future topic for an episode of Pro Wrestling What If. So of course, we got to begin in 2005 at WrestleMania 21, where the winner was the Rated R superstar Edge, in which he would end up successfully cashing in the briefcase, winning the WWE Championship from John Cena at New Year's Revolution 2006. And I think the winner this time around would be the Rabid Wolverine, Chris Benoit. Now, something that was really difficult on deciding the very first winner that wasn't Edge is because I feel like a lot of the winners would end up failing to cash in my opinion, and I feel that obviously the first winner had to have been successful in cashing in the briefcase. So I feel like the logical choice was Chris Benoit, since he had previously been a world champion within the last year prior to this. The big scenario on how I feel like Chris Benoit would have been able to cash in is either during or after the Battle Royal that had happened on SmackDown in January of 2006 that crowned a new World Heavyweight Champion after Batista had vacated the title. Therefore, they didn't have to have a Raw guy actually come over to the SmackDown to win the championship. Then in 2006, during WrestleMania 22, the winner was Rob Van Dam, in which he would be successful at cashing in during a pre-announced cash-in at ECW One Night Stand that year, defeating John Cena. And if it wasn't RVD, it probably would have been Bobby Lashley. Now, this was a Money in the Bank ladder match that had the weirdest selection of competitors. You had the high-flying styles of RVD and Shelton Benjamin, you had the brawling styles of Finlay and especially Bobby Lashley, and you even had some old-timers like the Nature Boy Ric Flair somehow be able to be a part of this match. So choosing a different winner would have been weird because I feel like a lot of these guys would fail, and I feel like for the first stretch of these picks that I'm about to do is going to be successful cash-ins, and I think the most successful out of the ones that isn't RVD would have been Bobby Lashley, especially because later on in the year he did win the ECW Championship, which is where I'm basically going to be making my pick here, where Bobby Lashley cashes in either during or after the Elimination Chamber match at December to Dismember in 2006. And at that point, that's where he won the ECW Championship in the real timeline, so in this case, it'd just be a Money in the Bank cash-in for him to win the title at that point. Then in 2007 at WrestleMania 23, the winner was Mr. Kennedy, in which he would never end up actually cashing in the briefcase because he had lost it during a match against the Rated R superstar Edge, who would then cash in the Money in the Bank successfully on The Undertaker becoming the World Heavyweight Champion. And so if it wasn't Mr. Kennedy, I think the winner would have been Edge, of course. And that's also because Mr. Kennedy actually mentioned in an interview that for a while there, it was discussed that Edge was going to become the first ever two-time Money in the Bank winner until the last couple of weeks before WrestleMania 23, where it was decided then that it should be Mr. Kennedy to win. In 2008 at WrestleMania 24, the winner of the Money in the Bank ladder match was CM Punk, which he had successfully cashed in on Edge during an episode of Monday Night Raw in June of 2008, winning the World Heavyweight Championship. But I think the winner in this case would be Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho, in kayfabe wise, was the creator of the Money in the Bank ladder match, so it just seems odd that he actually never won the Money in the Bank ladder match. And I think at this point, Chris Jericho would cash in the same way as CM Punk on Edge during that episode of Raw in June of 2008. And not only that, in the real timeline, Chris Jericho did end up winning the World Championship later on that year, so you could have had a bit of a babyface run for Chris Jericho as World Champion before then turning heel and starting that same program he did with Shawn Michaels. In 2009 at WrestleMania 25, the winner was also CM CM Punk, making him the first two-time Money in the Bank winner, which he had ended up cashing in at Extreme Rules 2009 after Jeff Hardy had won the World Heavyweight Championship in a ladder match against Edge, in which in this case I think it would have been Captain Charisma Christian winning the match. Christian is a realistic option since he had just returned to WWE after having a multi-year stint with TNA, and especially with Christian being an expert in the ladder match with the history of TLC matches, it would make sense for him to win. And I think in this case it would be a pre-announced cash-in against Jack Swagger for the ECW Championship at Backlash 2009, since Christian in the real timeline did have a match against Jack Swagger for the ECW title at Backlash and successfully won the championship. So it's just adding it as a match here with the Money in the Bank briefcase and how he would win the title and successfully win. Now in 2010, this is a weird year because we had 3 Money in the Bank ladder matches, starting off with WrestleMania 26, which was won by Jack Swagger, who had successfully cashed in on Chris Jericho on the SmackDown after WrestleMania 26, winning the World Heavyweight Championship. But I think in this case, it would be the Big Red Machine Kane. And I think Kane would also do the same thing as Jack Swagger in cashing in on the SmackDown after WrestleMania, becoming the World Heavyweight Champion. And of course, we've seen later on that Kane actually did win the SmackDown Money in the Bank briefcase at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view that we're going to be talking about, and eventually winning the World Heavyweight Championship. So it makes sense that in this case, you'd give Kane maybe a little bit of a babyface run before maybe turning heels so that we can get that program with The Undertaker going into the fall of 2010. Then going to the first Money in the Bank pay-per-view in 2010, starting with the Raw briefcase, it was won by The Miz. And The Miz would successfully cash in the briefcase on Randy Orton during an episode of Monday Night Raw in November of 2010, becoming the WWE Champion. And I think if it wasn't him, it would be Randy Orton. And this is mainly because Randy Orton was the WWE Champion at one point in 2010, and so I feel like realistically the way that Randy Orton would cash in the briefcase at this point is that after the match Sheamus has with John Cena in the steel cage match with the Nexus's interference, that's when Randy Orton could officially cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase. And of course, going into SummerSlam and especially in the fall time, you did see Randy Orton feud with Sheamus for the WWE Championship, so it kind of goes with the actual timeline and still see Randy Orton take the WWE Championship off the Sheamus. It's just a little bit earlier than expected. And then the last Money in the Bank winner for 2010 was of course Kane, who had done a same night cash-in on Rey Mysterio during the event and winning the World Heavyweight Championship. But I think in this case, once again, it screams out Captain Charisma Christian, and I think it's one perfect scenario I feel that Christian could successfully cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase would be in 2011 after Edge's match at WrestleMania 27. Christian would cash in, win the championship, and that's where he officially turns heel. Now moving on to 2011's Money in the Bank, which the Raw briefcase was won by Alberto Del Rio, who would successfully cash in for the WWE Championship after CM Punk's match at SummerSlam that year, in which if it wasn't Alberto Del Rio, I think it would have been Rey Mysterio. And the easy way for Rey Mysterio to cash in was of course the fact that he did win the WWE Championship in July of 2011 after CM Punk left Chicago with it. And so I feel maybe Rey Mysterio would do either a pre-announced cash-in or maybe a new champion's determined and he cashes it in then, and that's how he wins the WWE Championship. And then the SmackDown briefcase for 2011 was won by Daniel Bryan, who would successfully cash in for the World Heavyweight Championship after the match between Big Show and Mark Henry at TLC 2011. In which if it wasn't Daniel Bryan, I think it would have been Wade Barrett. But I don't think Wade Barrett would cash in at the same time as Daniel Bryan, but a little bit after, as I think it would either be the last SmackDown of 2011 or the first SmackDown of 2012, where Wade Barrett would cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase and become the World Heavyweight Champion. And this could have led to Wade Barrett defending the title at WrestleMania 28 against the eventual Royal Rumble winner Sheamus, and most likely that match wouldn't have lasted 18 seconds like it did in the real timeline with Daniel Bryan. Now for 2012's Money in the Bank, the Raw briefcase was won by John Cena, who would unsuccessfully cash in after he had a match with CM Punk at Raw 1000 in July of 2012 and won the match by DQ thanks to interference from the Big Show. But if it wasn't John Cena, then I think the Big Show would have actually won. I know that's a little bit of an odd choice, but when you look at the different competitors that had competed in this match, there were some different ones like like example Chris Jericho, but Chris Jericho was on his way out to do another tour with Fozzy, so it couldn't have been him. So I think Big Show would have been an easy pick as the first ever failed Money in the Bank cash-in, as I think he would have cashed in at the same point that John Cena and CM Punk could have had their match on Raw 1000, but made it a triple threat match, and he would have been the guy to be used as the fall guy, so that either, let's say if John Cena was winning the title, CM Punk wouldn't get pinned, and if it was the real timeline with CM Punk retaining, then John Cena wouldn't have to get pinned to actually lose the match. And then for the SmackDown briefcase, we have ourselves Dolph Ziggler winning the match, in which he had successfully cashed in on the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania 29, winning the World Heavyweight Championship from Alberto Del Rio. But if it wasn't Dolph Ziggler, I think that the winner once again would have been Christian. Now this was a difficult choice to do because this specific year was really filled with like lower to mid card competitors. Like you had Sin Cara in this match, I believe Tyson Kidd was in this match, especially Lord Tensai, who had been on such a losing streak at this point, was involved in that match that really it only screamed out one or two people. It was either going to be Dolph Ziggler or it was going to be Christian. And so the way that I see him successfully cashing in, because I feel if, let's say, John Cena was still the real winner of the Raw briefcase and kind of failed to cash in, they would make the SmackDown winner cash in successfully. So I think the way Christian cashes in is kind of the scenario that we've seen with Alberto Del Rio versus Big Show in January 2013 that led to Del Rio winning the championship, but in a cash-in form. So around that time, Christian would win the World Heavyweight Champion. Maybe it would be Jack Swagger versus Christian at WrestleMania 29, or maybe we do get Alberto Del Rio never turning babyface at this point and challenges Christian for the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania as a full-fledged heel. Now moving on to 2013 with the Raw briefcase, it was won by Randy Orton. After Daniel Bryan had won the championship, then proceeded to get pedigreed by Triple H, led to Randy Orton cashing in and winning the title in literally seconds. But I think if it wasn't Randy Orton, it would be Daniel Bryan to win this match, and the easy way for Daniel Bryan to successfully cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase would be a pre-announced cash-in where he does challenge John Cena to the match they ended up having at SummerSlam 2013 for the WWE Championship, which would also lead to Daniel Bryan successfully cashing in because of John Cena's elbow injury, and regardless, he needed time off at that point. Then the SmackDown briefcase in 2013, it was won by Damien Sandow, which ended up being a failed cash-in after he had tried cashing in on John Cena for the World Heavyweight Championship on an episode of Raw in October of 2013, in which if it wasn't Damien Sandow, I think it would have been Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes at this point was the odds-on favorite to win this specific Money in the Bank ladder match. A lot of people had faith in Cody Rhodes now making it to the World Heavyweight Championship picture after spending a little bit time in that Intercontinental Championship picture. However, for Cody Rhodes, I do think that this would be a failed Money in the Bank cash-in. I think the way this would happen is that Cody Rhodes tries cashing in the briefcase on Alberto Del Rio at SummerSlam, but I think he fails to cash in because of interference from Damien Sandow to end the Rhodes Scholars. In the real timeline, the group had dissolved when Damien Sandow had won the briefcase because he had screwed Cody Rhodes over, which led to the feud going into SummerSlam, but I think the Rhodes Scholars ending would be held off until the specific moment happens where Cody Rhodes tries to cash in, but his friend Damien Sandow betrays him and costing him the World Heavyweight Championship. Now moving on to 2014, where there's only one World Championship to go after, in which the winner of this was Seth Rollins, in which Seth Rollins would successfully cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase as he had intervened himself into the Brock Lesnar-Roman Reigns WWE Championship match at WrestleMania 31 and hitting a curb stomp and pinning Roman Reigns 1-2-3, making it the heist of the century. In which if it wasn't Seth Rollins winning this match, it probably would have been Dean Ambrose. And I think in this specific case, because of how red hot of a heel Seth Rollins was in joining the Authority by ending the Shield, if Dean Ambrose was the one to win the briefcase, then I think he would never get a chance to cash in the briefcase at this time, and that he would drop it to Seth Rollins at some point, like they've done in the past with Mr. Kennedy dropping it to Edge, and later on we've seen Otis dropping dropping it to The Miz. So I think it's that kind of scenario where Dean Ambrose, if he won Money in the Bank, he would never cash in and he would drop it to Seth Rollins at one point to where we still get the heist of the century. The 2015 Money in the Bank ladder match, the winner was Sheamus, in which Sheamus had successfully cashed in the briefcase after Roman Reigns had won the vacant championship working a long match with Dean Ambrose, winning the WWE Championship from him. And if it wasn't Sheamus, then I think the winner would have been the big dog Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns had the huge rocket strapped to him as being a top babyface of the WWE. And I honestly think Roman would do the exact same thing as Sheamus ended up doing, is cashing in after the main event of Survivor Series where we determine a new WWE champion, in which probably the champion would have been Sheamus realistically, and then Roman cashes in on him. The 2016 Money in the Bank ladder match, the winner of the match was Dean Ambrose, which he would actually successfully cash in the briefcase and win the WWE Championship after Seth Rollins had already worked a full match against Roman Reigns, and him winning the championship, seeing all three members of the Shield be WWE champion in one night at some point. In which, if it wasn't Dean Ambrose, I think the winner would have been Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens was one of the top heels of WWE at this point. Within the last year, he had a feud against John Cena, held the Intercontinental Championship, and it was only a matter of time before he made his way to the World Championship scene. And I think the way for Kevin Owens to cash in Money in the Bank, and I think he would successfully do it, is after the Rollins and Balor match for the Universal Championship. Now, it does kind of make the WWE Championship scene a little bit weird because without Dean Ambrose winning the title, does the WWE Championship go to the SmackDown brand and thus creating the WWE Universal Championship for Monday Night Raw? But let's say somehow, some way that title does go to SmackDown. I think that either after the match, where we kind of have a feeling that Finn Balor may be injured, but maybe on the Monday Night Raw after SummerSlam, where we officially hear that Finn Balor is injured, that is when Kevin Owens cashes in Money in the Bank, and instead of vacating the title, Kevin Owens would be able to win the championship from Finn Balor in some sort of way. Now, Money in the Bank 2017, we have the women's and men's briefcases. So starting off with the women's, the winner was Carmella, in which she would successfully cash in the briefcase after Charlotte was attacked by the Iconics on the episode of SmackDown after WrestleMania and win the SmackDown Women's Championship. And if it wasn't Carmella, I think Charlotte Flair would have been the winner of the briefcase that year. And I think an easy way for Charlotte Flair to successfully cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase, because I don't think they're going to make her fail the cash in, is to cash in on Natalya during the November 14th, 2017 episode of Friday Night SmackDown, which in the real timeline, Charlotte had faced Natalya in a match for the SmackDown Women's Championship and had won the championship in that match, thus placing her into the Survivor Series match against the Raw Women's Champion at the time. And so I feel Natalya would have had a different opponent, like let's say a Naomi or a Becky Lynch or something, but then Charlotte would cash in the briefcase and still win the championship. And then for the men's briefcase that year, it was won by Baron Corbin, in which he would actually fail to cash in the briefcase, as on the road to SummerSlam 2017, he had cashed in during a match between John Cena and Jinder Mahal, in which it would end up that Jinder Mahal would roll up Baron Corbin and retain the championship. But I think if it wasn't Baron Corbin, it would be AJ Styles, and I think that AJ Styles would successfully cash in the briefcase, and the perfect time would be kind of what he did in the real timeline, is have a match with Jinder Mahal on the November 7th, 2017 episode of SmackDown in Manchester, England, win the WWE Championship at that point, and inserting him in the champion versus champion match against Brock Lesnar at that year's Survivor Series. Moving on to Money in the Bank 2018, the women's briefcase holder was Alexa Bliss, in which Alexa Bliss would successfully cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase after interfering in the match between Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey, causing a disqualification, and then cashing in the briefcase on Nia Jax and winning the championship from her right after. And if it wasn't Alexa Bliss, I think it would have been Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch at this point was really getting over, and even though they tried that experiment of the heel turn at SummerSlam, it kind of backfired on them. And so with the Money in the Bank briefcase, Becky Lynch would cash in during a one-on-one match with Carmella and Charlotte Flair at SummerSlam, where I think it's either during or after the match that Becky would cash in and successfully win the SmackDown Women's Championship, still having the one-on-one match with Becky Lynch and Charlotte at, I believe it was Night of Champions at that point. I can't remember that September pay-per-view or Hell in a Cell, and then leading to that amazing match they end up having at the Evolution Fastlane pay-per-view in 2018. And then for the men's briefcase in 2018, the winner was Braun Strowman, in which Braun Strowman would end up doing a pre-announced cash-in on Roman Reigns for the Universal title inside Hell in a Cell, which would be a failed cash-in due to Brock Lesnar interfering in the match, causing the match to be a no contest. And I think had it not been Braun Strowman, Kofi Kingston could have been Mr. Money in the Bank. Now, I'm sure there was probably a couple different options I would have went with, but with Kofi Kingston, I actually have two scenarios of cashing in, whether it's a successful one or a failed cash-in. So I think the successful way for Kofi Kingston to cash in Money in the Bank would have been on the SmackDown after WrestleMania 35, which unfortunately means we don't get Kofi Mania at that point. We probably would have gotten, let's say, Kevin Owens versus Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 35, since they did wrestle at the Fastlane pay-per-view the month prior. And so whether it's Daniel Bryan retaining or Kevin Owens becoming the champion, we could see some sort of thing happen where it causes Kofi Kingston to cash in the briefcase and win the championship, and thus continuing what ended up happening in the real timeline, is holding that title until dropping it to Brock Lesnar in October of 2019. And so the direction of if Kofi failed the cash-in would be at some point during the road to WrestleMania, Kofi would try to cash in on Daniel Bryan with some sort of finish like we seen with the Randy Orton John Cena match from No Way Out 2008, making the match between Kofi Kingston and Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 35, and then at this point getting Kofi Mania, where he walks out of WrestleMania as the WWE champion. Then for the 2019 Money in the Bank ladder match, the women's briefcase was won by Bayley, in which she would successfully cash in on that same night against Charlotte. But if it wasn't Bayley, I think it would have been Natalya. And although I do like Natalya, and I know a lot of people don't enjoy her work, I do think that Natalya would be doomed for a failed Money in the Bank cash-in. And I think the way that they would do this is for Natalya to intervene in the match between Bayley and Charlotte Flair on the October 11th, 2019 edition of SmackDown, where it causes to be a triple threat match. And that way, in that match in the real timeline, Bayley had won the title, but she doesn't have to pin Charlotte Flair to do so. She pins Natalya to do so. And then the men's briefcase was questionably won by the Beast Incarnate Brock Lesnar, who would successfully cash in the briefcase after Seth Rollins' match at Extreme Rules 2019, and he would win the Universal Championship. And so if it wasn't Brock Lesnar, I think the winner would have been Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre at this point, I believe, was the odds-on favorite to win the briefcase before WWE swerving us on having Brock Lesnar win the briefcase. Even though part of me thinks that maybe Drew McIntyre could possibly be a failed Money in the Bank cash-in, but I think one of the ideal scenarios of successfully cashing in the briefcase could be a same-night Money in the Bank cash-in, where he would cash in after the AJ Styles Seth Rollins match, and we would see Drew McIntyre be the champion up until maybe Extreme Rules that year, dropping to Seth Rollins, so we still get Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. Then we have the pandemic Money in the Bank ladder match in 2020, in which the women's briefcase was won by Asuka. And if you remember that year, technically the winner of the briefcase actually won the Raw Women's Championship itself, considering that Becky Lynch had ended up getting pregnant and had to vacate the championship. And if it wasn't Asuka, I think the winner should have been Shayna Baszler. Shayna Baszler was already red hot when she was in NXT, and when she got called up to the main roster, became the runner-up in the Royal Rumble, and eventually got the shot by winning the Elimination Chamber for the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania 36. Shayna Baszler should have won that match, but somehow ended up losing. So I think to kind of rebuild her, it would have made sense to at least put the championship on her at this particular time, even if that meant that Shayna Baszler would drop the title maybe back to Asuka, perhaps at SummerSlam, where I believe Asuka did win back the Raw Women's Championship from Sasha Banks at SummerSlam that year. And then once again, questionably so, the men's Money in the Bank briefcase was won by Otis of all people, in which, like I mentioned earlier, he never actually ended up cashing in the briefcase because he lost it during a match against The Miz, who would then actually be able to cash in the briefcase after the Elimination Chamber match at Elimination Chamber 2021, Miz successfully cashing in and becoming the champion. And if it wasn't wasn't Otis, then I think the winner should have been Daniel Bryan. I think that he would do a pre-announced cash-in against Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, which would take place at Fastlane 2021. And in the real timeline, Daniel Bryan did face Roman Reigns in a Universal Championship match at Fastlane, and with this match, it would be a failed Money in the Bank cash-in, and probably once again due to some sort of shenanigans, which would lead still to that triple threat match that we got at WrestleMania 37 that featured Daniel Bryan, the 2021 Royal Rumble winner Edge, and Roman Reigns. So it would be a reason for Daniel Bryan to be still inserted in that match is because of some sort of shenanigans from him cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase. The 2021 Money in the Bank event, the women's briefcase was won by Nikki ASH, in which she had successfully cashed in on Charlotte Flair on the Monday Night Raw after Money in the Bank and won the women's championship. In which if it wasn't Nikki ASH, I think it could have been Alexa Bliss. At this point, Alexa Bliss was red hot because she was in that storyline with The Fiend and ended up turning her back on The Fiend at WrestleMania 37. And so to keep up with the momentum, it could have made sense for Alexa Bliss to win the briefcase and eventually win the Raw Women's Championship. And I think the way they could have done it is pretty much exactly like the real timeline, where it's either at the pay-per-view for a same night cash-in or on the Monday Night Raw after Money in the Bank, where she wins the championship. And for the men's briefcase, it was won by Big E, who would successfully cash in during the summer of 2021 on Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship. And so if it wasn't Big E, I think the winner could have been Kevin Owens. There was a lot of scenarios I looked with the different competitors from 2021. I actually almost went with Seth Rollins to win this match, but I think if Seth Rollins had won the briefcase at this point, we wouldn't get the Edge and Seth Rollins feud going into the summer and especially into the fall, where we had that Hell in a Cell match at Crown Jewel. So I think the safe bet was Kevin Owens, where he could also cash in at basically the same point as Big E did on Bobby Lashley, and just like Big E in the real timeline, he would drop it at day one to Brock Lesnar, since Kevin Owens was a part of that match that Big E was also a part of that led to Brock Lesnar winning the championship at the day one event. Then Money in the Bank 2022, the women's briefcase was won by Liv Morgan, who would successfully cash in on the same night after Ronda Rousey's match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. And if it wasn't Liv Morgan, I think the winner would have been Asuka. And so I think the easy scenario for Asuka to cash in successfully would be on Bianca Belair on the Raw after WrestleMania 39, because we ended up seeing Asuka versus Bianca Belair at the next pay-per-view of Night of Champions for the Raw Women's Championship, which would end up turning into the WWE Women's Championship. That means at this particular point, Bianca Belair would have had a different opponent for WrestleMania 39 instead of Asuka herself, because with Asuka and the Money in the Bank briefcase, she probably would have had that match with Bianca Belair at that time, but could have had it at the Night of Champions event like we've seen in the real timeline. Then for the men's briefcase, it was won by Austin Theory, who had actually failed to cash in the briefcase on a November 2022 edition of Monday Night Raw, where he actually tried cashing in on the United States Championship, in which if it wasn't Austin Theory, I think it could have been Drew McIntyre at this point. And I do see a scenario that Drew McIntyre would be a failed Money in the Bank cash-in, and it's something that ended up happening in the real timeline, and that's basically a pre-announced cash-in on Roman Reigns for a match at the Clash at the Castle event, where we did see the two face off against each other for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. And of course, Drew McIntyre would lose thanks to a debuting Solo Sikoa on the main roster and joining the Bloodline. Basically what we've seen in the real timeline between Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns would happen, but because of a pre-announced Money in the Bank cash-in, and Drew McIntyre would fail to cash in, unfortunately. And now moving into the last year as I'm recording this, which is 2023, the winner of the women's briefcase was Io Sky, in which Io Sky would successfully cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase at SummerSlam 2023 on Bianca Belair, in which if it wasn't Io Sky, I think it would have been Becky Lynch. Now, I think the way that Becky Lynch could have cashed in the Money in the Bank briefcase is not at WrestleMania to have the match with Rhea Ripley, so unfortunately that isn't going to be a match. But I think basically after what we've seen with Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, which cost Rhea Ripley to vacate the title, that's how Becky Lynch would cash in the briefcase and successfully become the new WWE Women's World Champion. And then last but not least, the men's briefcase for 2023, it was won by Damian Priest, who would successfully cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase after CM Punk had attacked Drew McIntyre when he won the title, and Damian Priest would win the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 40. And so if it wasn't Damian Priest, I think the winner could have been Logan Paul. Now I know a lot of people really wanted LA Knight to win last year's Money in the Bank ladder match, but hear me out on the reasoning of how Logan Paul would cash in and successfully win either the WWE Championship or the World Heavyweight Championship. At WrestleMania 40, we had seen Cody Rhodes finish the story against Roman Reigns. And so I think at some point during a segment on Monday Night Raw, even maybe the one that he had with The Rock, maybe something happens where Cody Rhodes does get attacked, which would lead to Logan Paul actually cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase and winning the championship, thus really cutting the reign of Cody Rhodes short. And so this would cause Cody Rhodes to once again have a chase storyline, trying to once again go after the WWE Championship, since we always like seeing the babyface chase for the title rather than actually being the champion. And so this probably would also mean that Logan Paul would have had to lose the United States Championship in the triple threat match at WrestleMania 40 in order for this to happen. I think that would have been a crazy Money in the Bank cash in. We would have really been behind Cody at this point because we'd rather see him as champ than Logan Paul realistically.